Welcome to the channel. We have a very, very special episode today with Erica, who is Crow and Crown on Instagram. And I am super excited because I have a lot of questions about her work and the topics that she covers. So this is going to be focusing on Venus and Mars. And it's Venus and Mars as it relates to our inner creation team, or like our creation dynamic. You might call this, it has to do with Mars being our desire and will. And desire, I was reminded this week, means with the stars. It means going with the stars, whereas words like catastrophe is against the stars, disaster against the stars, and desire is from the stars, with the stars. So I think maybe it's from the stars. But Mars has to do with our true desire and how we, what I've been calling lately, attack, because to me it feels like a pouncing action. And Venus being how we attract. So I think that's just an easy little attract and attack. Venus being how we pull things in, the way we use the power of magnetism. Another imagery that's been coming in strong for me is, strangely, I've been Venus gemstone for, I think, since 2016. And I just started having this vision of a Venus gemstone planted in our chest, or the way it looked to me anyway was like, I've also been studying Kemet and the ancient Egyptian teachings. And so I think maybe the imagery of having that gemstone planted, you know, because that you see a lot of those Egyptian drawings and mummies and stuff with like actual crystals all over them. So the Venus gemstone being like coated with information about what we believe that we're worth, what we value, and then all throughout our life that we're constantly attracting that. So we're constantly like emanating or radiating this energy that is informing what it is, like informing the universe, informing great spirit, and informing creator. If you think about that gemstone in you radiating out coded information that says what I value, what I'm worth, then everybody, the whole world, animals, babies, potential lovers, potential friends, potential working reciprocity, working relationships, you're informing them with that emanation of what you're holding as your own sense of value and worth. So that is how we are attracting things. And then Mars is the part of us that is able to go out and get it. Venus, attract, draw it in, and Mars, attack, pounce, go get the thing, claim it. So these two are so personal and so important for how we show up in the world, not just in our relationships, but extremely important in how we show up in our relationships. I've been reading astrology professionally since 2014. I've read hundreds of charts, done, I wouldn't say, I mostly was doing my readings via recording. So I wasn't having live interaction with people until 2020. Sometimes I would do live events and read for people in person. So the reason that's important is because when I'm in front of somebody, it's more of a counseling session. And I have got to hear repeatedly that people really do find themselves in relationships that are either identical to their Venus sign or identical to their Mars sign. What I have found for myself is that there'll be times in life when I feel more receptive. I'm more like,
We lost your audio. No. Try again.
I had a call.
Oh.
That doesn't
You're back. You're back.
All right. So what was the last thing you heard me say, Erica?
We attract relationships that are exactly like our Venus or exactly like our Mars.
Okay, so when you're more in your Venus and you're more like in this state of receptivity, you're more in that like ravish me. You know what I mean? You're more pulled back and like pulling things toward you. You're more whatever your Venus sign is, that you're doing it in that kind of a way. That when I've been in that, and I'm like very studious. My Venus is in Aquarius, just like Erica. So I'm very studious. I'm studying. I'm really in my Venus, and I'm like having my whole own experience of my femininity and the unusual way that it shows up because of Venus and Aquarius. I undoubtedly attract people who are exactly like my Mars archetype. Now, when I've been more in my Mars, so I'm more action oriented. You see me posting things every day, and I'm more dynamic and out there, injecting, or I like to say, penetrating reality with my willpower, with my desire. That's I'm way more out there. Like I am more like that at this current phase. I notice when I'm more Mars, there's, you see that you can tell in a person too when they're being more of one or the other. Then I attract so much more of the Aquarian of my Venus. And I'll notice that even the men that I'm attracted to, while they're still men and masculine, they become more receptive and I am more dynamic. So this is really, really important for you to find out, because most of the people that I've read astrology for are completely oblivious. But once I say it, they're like, oh my God, that is exact. You're describing me to a T. You're describing my husband to a T, or all my partners. It's very simple and very, it hits as a yes. And then I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I do want to let you know that there is a way to work with your Venus and Mars so that you become both of them. And, so now you're not looking to the outside, because what was happening before I was conscious of this material. And I'm not saying it doesn't still happen from time to time, but what was happening was that I was either feeling a lack or deficiency in either. Most of the time it was in my Venus. I felt more disconnected from my inner Venus archetype. I felt, not seen about for my intellect, and ashamed of being the smart person who's always studying and reading books, and trying to be more of like the ditzy, like what I thought guys liked more of. So I was really disconnected from my Venus. And I was constantly attracting the negative aspects of it, because I'm looking outside for somebody to fill the void of what I'm unable to identify with, and what I am unable to like flower outward. So I grab that thing that's like me and I pull it in, and I want it to fulfill this role of my ideal partner. And then what happens is that the person is like, can never do right. He can never, he's trying, he wants to, and he loves me, but he can never be that. And it's so frustrating. And so the work of the book that I wrote, The Alchemy of Intimacy, is learning to be both. And there's all these actual practical techniques that you can do to embody both Venus and Mars. Now, after 7 years of doing that work for myself, the first time I got in a relationship, it was completely different, but I also noticed that I was still attracted to those archetypes of my Venus and Mars. So it didn't like take it away. It just made it to where now it doesn't control me. I'm so much more aware of it. And so when the person is doing those things that are like my Venus and Mars, I, instead of being like, oh my God, I love you, you're so great. I'm like, I love myself. Like, I love how this is, that I can acknowledge things that make me feel so good. And I don't put it on them. Like, oh, you're doing this. It's like, I acknowledge that that's coming from me. So, okay, I think that's enough about Venus and Mars. And oh, one more thing is that these two planets are traveling together in the sky for a ridiculous amount of time. Normally, they're together for about a week, 2 weeks. They come together about every 18 months, every 2 years. 18 months or 2 years, that they'll be in the same place in the sky for their meeting. It goes back into ancient Babylonian times, that because these are the planets that we're able to visually connect with all throughout time. There's been so much scientific observation and use of noticing what's happening with these planets at certain times. So this is actually such a pleasure and wonderful blessing that we are able to look on the internet. We have very skilled astrologers who can tell us about these things. And astrology wasn't always available to everybody. Like, there was a big period of time that it was only available to royalty. So for us to have so much ease of access to this information is such a blessing. And 2 months, like these two planets together for 2 months, it's happening now. They have their first exact conjunction on February 16th. Something happens on the 11th. I think on the 11th, they are with Pluto.
Oh.
But together, yes. But the thing is, with that interaction with Pluto, it's giving us a massive transformation, really burning down all the old ways that we worked with masculinity and femininity, and helping us to, because before you build, you have to tear down your structure. So in Capricorn, it really has to do with like the next 7 generations. Like, this is so big right now that it will change the way we do relationships for, I want to say, for the next 7 generations. And they're gonna be together all through February, all through March, and then into April, they'll start to distance each other. And then Mars is going retrograde, starting a new cycle. So this is a really powerful time for us to really get clear about our values, our desire, what kind of little manipulation games that we play with ourselves, what kinds of ways we're running our energy. So I'm not too proud to say that I have used my sexuality and my sensuality to get things that I wanted, like as a plan that I'm going to do such a thing years ago. And then I've also done the opposite, where I hide my sensuality and my sexuality because I'm like, I want to be respected for my brain. So I will completely cover my beauty so that I can be respected in the man's world, or being able to like exceed when I was in the Navy and excel because of my ability to be more masculine. So it's things that we do either consciously or unconsciously that are invalidating our true femininity and our true masculinity, which will show up in our relationships. And it's not satisfying. Like, for, I would say, 80% of people who I know who talk about their relationships or relationship material, it's not like, oh my God, it's wonderful and you know, or even like it seems like we have a problem. Like it seems like we have a lot of deception, um, mistrust, a lot of things that just with this Pluto interaction, I think are going to be getting broken up. And we have a huge potential for really rewriting how we do relationships. And so, Erica, I would like to know from you about first everything that I've said. If there's something that you're like, oh, I want to talk about that.
I felt like I needed to make notes. So I think the biggest thing, or the best place to start is, when you discuss the idea of we are getting reflections back of our ideal of how we do that particular planetary energy. I think what is, when I look at a person's chart, when they sit down and I'm doing, say, an intuitive reading for them, or specifically for soul contracts, the interesting thing that I think comes up, and this happens with, I think it happens with every house and every sign in our chart, but I think with Venus and Mars, the key is integration, because I think that it's a place where maybe because they're personal planets, but also I think culturally, we have learned, exactly as you said, to manipulate the ideal of what those things are doing. And so I think that, ultimately, the key is integration. You want to be able to integrate and balance what it is that you learn. So to take an example of you saying, okay, well, I knew that I could use my feminine wiles to alter this situation, or I could turn it down a notch and maybe I could bring up a little bit more Mars. I know how to read the situation and then play it to my benefit. The problem I don't want to say problem, the challenge that occurs with trying to live your soul contract is that as a human being, you're short-sighted. So you are looking to see what the ultimate short-term goal is when you're manipulating that energy. And I think that once you start looking at, first off, your chart as a whole, but when you really start to understand how soul contracts work, you recognize that, particularly in what we consider our Venus-Mars relationships, because we often think it's romantic, really what it's doing is it's pulling out this complementary energy that's supposed to be guiding you to a place where you're empowered as opposed to disempowered. And when you can align that empowered feeling because you recognize what you're doing and you recognize ultimately that the interactions that you're having are either benefiting your soul progression or they're not benefiting your soul progression. So I think that the key there in anything in your chart is to identify what the role of that material or that perhaps that sign is, and how you play it as a tool in unpacking your soul contract. So for the people that have no, let me back it up a little. So I answered your question, but let me back it up a little. So for people who have never come across the idea of a soul contract, the most basic and essential way to kind of look at a soul contract is that, your soul contract is a non-physical agreement that you've made at soul level for your consciousness when you are incarnated into this lifetime. And ultimately the point of having a soul contract is that in our evolution as souls, we need to have experiences that we reflect off of other people. We need those other people that we encounter in our life to be able to bounce our experience off of. So the first point of that is that you can't do your soul contract alone. You have to have life experience. You have to have people that to interact with. It would be like walking into a room, it would be like walking into a disco and you're the only person there and you're like, I can dance, but this is really just not going to go very far, right? Like you're not going to have a good time. When we incarnate here, we have the same kind of experience in that in order for me to learn what I need to learn, I need to bounce that off of the experience of other people in my life. And so what we consider, or what many people consider, our life between lives, the time that is spent before we incarnate into this reality, we have a long line of thousands, if not more, lessons that we need to learn, that we've been trying to do for multiple lifetimes. And we're just trying to get really good and master each of these, what's the word I would use? Like master understandings, master teachings that we are trying to integrate. And all of that is for our soul's progression to, you fill in the blank, right? To source, to creation, to wherever the ultimate source of our creation comes from. So I call it God, people call it other things. But it's kind of like this idea of like, if I learn if I do all of my lessons and I get it right, then eventually I will ascend. I hate that word and I hate that theory of people who are ascending, but that's kind of like the Western idea of what people think happens to you. And when we incarnate here on Earth, this just happens to be one of the places where we are learning a lot of our lessons, because there are certain lessons that you have to do in a skin body as a human being. That's just the only way you'll be able to learn it. So before we incarnate, every time, we are part of a group of people. Some people call them your soul group or your soul family, but it's really the energy of who you have always been, the essence of who you've always been. And if you can imagine it like you're sitting at a boardroom table and everybody that's the main players or the main characters in your life are all there. And somebody goes, okay, I'm going to be the mom this time because I need to die when you're 4 and you need to have this particular soul experience. So this time, you know what? I'm not going to hang out very long. I'm going to incarnate as your mom. And somebody else goes, oh, well, you know, that's a lesson, a life lesson of perhaps it's loss, coming to balance with the idea of loss, or I need to know what infinite love is, or whatever the soul lesson is that you have. You guys all agree, and all of the players agree that they're going to play each role in your life. And we have kind of like major characters, and then we have kind of minor characters who sometimes they come in for, you know, a short lesson. Sometimes they're a trigger to move forward into other things. You know, you needed to marry that person at 16 because you needed that baby at that time, but that person was only there as your sperm donor. Like there are every single one of these people that you encounter plays a role in your life. And the reason is because everybody has signed on in good faith that they are accepting their role this time, no matter if they're the bad guy or the good guy. They're accepting the role, and they're going to do, from a soul level, they're going to do their very best they possibly can when they get here, for them to help you on your soul journey and for your soul learnings, and vice versa. You need to do your job too. You need to be there to be the person who says, tonight's the night, I'm packing up your bags, get out of the house. Like each of those people has to exist in the contract. And if you expand it even further than that, some people will argue that every single human being that you encounter, down to the lady that checks your groceries every day, those people have been picked for you, because you just don't know. You don't know when the lady that you was your grocery lady when you were a kid doesn't end up being the lady that, I don't know, donates a liver to you when you're 40. Like you don't know, right? So when it comes to the idea of our interaction with our soul contract, and what gets sticky is that one of the crummy things about incarnation is that we have all of this source knowledge when we're creating the plan, but then imagine trying to take God and shove it into the size of a marble. That's basically your brain when you incarnate here. So you don't remember most of the time what you promised you were going to do. And so you go ahead and you incarnate and you have all of these individual experiences and you meet all of these people. And eventually you get to the point where you're like, oh my God, why did I do this? Or this is the best plan ever, or I can't believe that I met XYZ person. And hands down, when I meet with clients, they, more often than not, they will meet with me for a soul contract reading because they have one or more Pluto moments in their life. They have a chaos moment in their life. And it will trigger everything from a nervous breakdown to full elation. But what they're looking for is to find out from a bird's eye perspective or from an omniscient perspective, what was the purpose of that encounter? And I think the older you get, the more you're able to give a little bit of space between the encounter and then being a neutral observer. But frequently the problem is that we're blinded of that when that interaction is happening right away, or when there's, you know, when you just can't get over it. And everybody has one of those moments where like it sticks with them. And maybe they've healed a lot around it, but even still, they still have questions about it. So more often than not, that's what my clients come to me for, is they're looking for, where does this fit in the story of my life? And what's the purpose of this encounter right now, from a soul perspective? Because the real point is not just to survive it, but it is to thrive through it, learn the lesson so that you don't have to repeat the lesson. And that's a lot of the issue that people don't recognize, is that with generational trauma, ancestral trauma, you know, sometimes we're carrying in this life some stuff that, you know, our third great grandmother was still trying to get over it. And I have clients, like healing clients that do like generational healing with me. And it's the same thing. It's like, you know, and the strangest things, people will come and say things like, you know, I don't know why, but I just really don't like institutions. You know what I mean? Like something random like that. Like I hated being in school. I wanted to be out as quickly as possible. I was going to get a job to work at a hospital, and it was probably my dream job. But as soon as I was in that kind of formal situation, I couldn't handle it. So when we have those moments of friction, and that's usually an indicator that it's like, this is a contract moment. Not that you don't have contract moments all day long, but I would say if you wanted to, you know, you could go minimum to maximum, give it a rating of 1 to 4. 1 being like, it's just happening in my life, sort of in the background, but it might show up somewhere one day, you know, like it might be, in my case, it might be like the kid that I taught that ends up coming and being my dryer vent guy, which is a real thing. Like I taught him 20 years ago, and he walked into my house. I looked at him and was like, did I teach you? You know, so you have moments, but the key to understanding your soul contract from a, like as a holistic understanding of all of these things have a reason, really comes down to acknowledging, first off, that that's possible, that everybody, no matter how much of an asshole they were or how amazing they were, every single one of them has a role. But also understanding, and this is the key, that every single one of those interactions is not about you psychoanalyzing the situation. It's about you recognizing how you're feeling, what it's raising in you, and what's the purpose of that. So to give an example of that, the guy that showed up to do my dryer vent, I had a series of weird things like that happen for 2 weeks straight. And I had a whole bunch of people from my past come up. But when he came up, he wasn't just some kid I had taught. He was a kid that I had actually kept his project and used it as a sample. He was in my very first English class I ever taught. And I kept his stuff as a sample because the kid had been so meticulous. And I had been thinking about that job for a couple of weeks, thinking, man, my life is so much different now. Remember when I taught at Doyle, da 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 da. And when I saw him, I thought to myself, that's what this has been about. It's been about like, let's go look at who you were then. is there stuff dangling that you haven't dealt with? Or is there stuff that you really liked about who you were at that time and you're not integrating it now? Where's the balance? Why are you getting the trigger? And so some of those triggers are the huge ones, right? It's like every week I have to deal with my ex because we're switching the kids. And it's like, you know, like I don't want the moment and I don't want the learning. But at the same time, the one thing that people also need to recognize is until you have, I want to say pay my dues because it's not, that's not it. But really, when you have learned your soul lesson and it has integrated, that's when it goes away. And that's why, slight segue, that's also why a lot of the time when people are discussing the idea of soul contracts, that's why nowadays we just call them twin flames. But really what they are is they're kind of the 10 on the scale of 1 to 5 of soul lesson moments. And we just call it a twin flame, but really what it should be is like brutal ass mirror that's going to show you every fucking wrinkle you've got about every area of your life, because it might be wrapped in a pretty present, but it's here to dig deep. And it's really nice because I'm going to go on my rant about the idea of twin flames, but let me get on my soapbox for a second. I'm a twin flame in this incarnation, and Anjani knows this. It's like it's been the best and worst experience of my life. Like it'll bring you to the worst places on earth, it'll bring you to the best places on earth. But I get a little touchy about the idea or the term twin flame, because I think that, and I'm going to be like really honest and blunt about this. Oftentimes, I think that people glamorize the term twin flame to avoid dealing with relationships that are just simply codependent and very toxic, and people can't cope with getting out of them. And so I'm touchy about the word twin flame, but I like to use it in terms of the idea that if you are willing and open to accept the idea that you can be in a soul contract with a person that is supposed to both bring out the best in you and open up your eyes to truly the energy that is possible in the universe, that's not going to come without you having to also learn the darkest Pluto-y crappy parts of that. Because just like anything, you can't enjoy one thing if you aren't fully aware of the full spectrum of what it is. And that's the fundamentals of a soul contract, is that with a soul contract, it's about learning the spectrum so that you can find the balance between what am I reflecting, what am I accepting, and where am I finding my authenticity in between on that spectrum. Because we like, you know, a lot of what I deal with or the context that I put a lot of soul contracts in are the archetypes of people that show up in our lives. And fundamentally, that we have to go through the gamut of all of those archetypes. You know, we have to be the wounded child. We have to be the whore. We have to be the old crone. We have to be the seeker. We have to be all of those different kinds of archetypes, because that's what it is to be human. So our goal is, when we're interacting and we're having a soul, like a soul contract interaction with someone, first you need to identify that it's happening to you. You have to be super present and open and willing to accept what's coming at you. And you have to be, above all, fully trusting that the universe is going to bring you to that place over and over again in different forms every time until you learn the lesson. And you have to be willing to learn the lesson. And that requires fearlessness, because sometimes it's not a nice place to go through. And I don't want to be, I don't want to paint people with a broad brush, but I think that historically women have understood this at a more deep level than men do. Only in that, until a man, let's go back to Middle Ages, until a man has a sword in his chest and he's being ripped open and manages to survive it, he's not going to understand the depth and the power that is required to give birth to a baby, for instance, where you feel like you're about to die. Like you have to trust that you're not going to die, right? And on a lot of levels, living your soul contract at its optimum level requires you to not be afraid of pursuing wherever this is going to bring you. And in fact, I would argue, be a little bit more willing to do those things. So that's why I laughed about the Pluto thing. I was like, oh, great. But then I was like, well, bring it. I'd rather do it now. Like I'd rather deal with whatever I need to deal with now, because it's going to present itself to me. And that's okay if you're fearful and you don't want to do that, because you're allowed to baby step it through. This is not our only incarnation. You don't have to get all the lessons done this time. In fact, you're probably not even going to get close to that, right? And that's okay. And that's completely okay. So yeah, I don't even remember what the first question was on.
So is there a difference between twin flames and soulmates?
Okay, so there's mixed, if you Google it, you're going to get a lot of answers. But my experience, both with clients and just observation, the short answer is yes, I do think so. And I would put both of them under the moniker of sacred relationship. All of our relationships are sacred, but I do think that there are some people who sign on to be more of a guide for our soul. And I think that that is really the role of someone that I would consider like a soulmate. So that person is there. There's a good chance that they too will reincarnate with you over and over again in some way. But it's different in that the intensity of the relationship is not as brutal. And I use the word brutal because in twin flame relationships are brutal. Like true, if you've gotten to the point where you truly have a twin flame who has incarnated here, like hold on, because their whole purpose is to root out and uncover the hardest stuff for you, because you need to meet it for yourself. And they only show up when in theory, you're ready for them to show up. So when you have a soulmate, you can have a person, I have people that I count as my soulmates for sure. Some of them have been in my life for a very short period of time. Some of them I've had forever. Some of them continue to reappear at different times. But if I were to say to you, how do you differentiate the two? What I would say to you is think about a person that at any moment, no matter if you've spoken to them or you haven't, you pick up the phone, that person is going to be like, yo, what do you need? I got you. That's a soulmate, right? It's a person that you don't talk to them for 4 years. They're still going to be there and they're going to be like, how can I help? I'm here for you. Oh. And I think those are beautiful because my opinion of this is this is just me and Spirit's opinion of what we've observed, is that with people that have soulmate relationships, those relationships, you are growing in parallel ways at the same time. They're the kind of people that even if you don't speak for 4 years, you pick up the phone, the person will be like, oh my God, I just broke up with my boyfriend. Oh my God, so did I. Like you are running parallel soul lessons so that you can act as support for the other person. Mm. A twin flame, oftentimes, in fact, more often than not in my experience with clients, your twin flame on some level, right from the moment you were born, you will have had some sort of weird soul connection with this person. So my twin flame is 11 years younger than I am. And his mother, literally her brother was friends with my eldest brother, who was 29 years older than me. And I didn't find that out until years later when I bumped into his mother, and his mother asked me my last name thinking that McNeese was my maiden name. And I was like, oh no. And she just looked at me like she had known me her whole life and went, oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry about your brother. And I was like, what? How do you know my brother? It was just wild. And this person didn't show up until I was 30. Like, this person didn't show up in my life until I was 30. So oftentimes people who have a twin flame experience will find out either that they literally have some sort of 6 degrees of separation, or they also have super, super parallel life stories. So if they had a childhood illness, chances are their twin flame had a childhood illness. And that, again, is because we need to have larger soul learnings at similar times, so that in our timeline, when that person shows up, you don't have to kind of catch them up. You know what I mean? Like, as opposed to you're on the phone and you need to catch them up. This person could be a full out stranger, and it's like you meet them and you've known them your whole life. You don't have a built soulmate story with them. Does that make sense? Does that answer it? Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I saw Debbie. What did Debbie say? You can look at the twin flame as one soul split into two, and soulmate is a strong connection with another soul. Yeah, so a lot of people think that a twin flame is a split of the soul. I am not one of those people that believe that. I believe that our souls, there is no chance you can fragment our soul. We're not searching the universe for our other half. I think that we are whole always. Where the splitting theory came in, I think, is because our twin flame has this miraculous ability to reflect back some of the things that we are struggling the most to integrate. So if that person has, if you have really poor self-esteem, this person is going to be the kind of person that naturally is a hype, like is your hype man or your hype woman. And they are 100%, like Deb says, they are your mirror. So they're mirroring back behavior that you are not aware of in your conscious life. That's just it. You know, if the person is a lazy bum, then maybe you need to check yourself for where you're putting your energy. But chances are what you're going to be doing is projecting it and looking at this person going, they're driving me fucking crazy. And more often than not, they're driving you crazy because, again, to what I was saying at the beginning, we're not integrating that thing about ourselves, right? And so it's there to integrate that. But I think that when people have the there's a lot of stuff about twin flames, right? Like, we've now put on it a structural idea that there's a chaser and that there's a run, like, you know, there's a runner, there's a chaser, there's this dynamic, there's that dynamic. As much as I do think, going back to the idea of archetypes, that I do think that there are periods of time where our soul goes, okay, you need to do this, then you need to do this, then you need to do this. I think we're just putting labels on that. And again, I'm always weird, like the psychologist in me goes, oh, I'm hesitant to label things like that, or to be labeling myself, because then you have a bit of crisis of conscience when you're like, well, I'm 35% of a runner, but maybe I'm also the chaser because I feel like I need to turn around and I need this person to chase me. Well, yeah, like that goes back to the idea of the Venus and Mars, right? And I loved the word that you used was pounce. So we have this shitty attitude about Mars, that Mars just sounds like they're coming at you with a sword and they'll take no prisoners. And as much as that is true, the beautiful balance of an integration of that with our Venus attributes is that our Venusian attributes, just like, think about how sensual the idea of Venus is. When you think of, you know, most people know the Venus de Milo. Like, think about that painting and how beautiful she is, and how integrated into her environment she is, and how worshipped she is by every person who stares at her, right? So taking that and recognizing that you can be this object of softness And integrating that with Mars, the idea of pouncing is the perfect thing, because who has the power there? And where's that power coming from? Is it coming from Mars? Well, I think the active part of that is coming from Mars, but the part that's willing to pounce is the part that comes from Venus. It's not from, and so I think it's key to looking at your dynamic with sacred relationship. I think it's necessary to at least just take a look to see where your Venus and your Mars are. If you're the kind of person who doesn't have anything to do with astrology at all, I think that just looking at it and then looking up the traits of the sign it's in. How well do you do that? Like, thank God my Venus is in, or that my Mars is in Pisces. Thank God, because if it was in any other sign, there'd probably be a jealous beheading. So like, and I'm a super jealous person, and like my relationship dynamic is whack to the normal human being. So what does that do for jealousy? Well, I picked this, right? So that's the other thing I want to address about soul contracts is you still have free will. Like, you have free will to make the choice. You know, that moment when the inner voice, I always call it, I never call it the inner voice. I call it, when you're standing there and that person's talking to you, because it's not really your own voice. It's that other voice, like that person that comes with you everywhere. Makes me sound like I'm supposed to be locked up. But that voice, when you're in a situation that's like, leave, this is going to go bad. You need to leave, right? Shit. And then you either make the choice to be like, sorry, I've got to go. Or the next step is like, insert, just, no, it shouldn't be insert, but it should be like, whatever. And you're like, fuck, why did I stay? That moment, you had a choice. And your choice could have been, you were supposed to struggle with yourself and you were still supposed to stay. Or doesn't necessarily mean leave is the right answer. It just means in that moment, and we have those all the time, right? In that moment, it doesn't have to be a huge moral crisis moment. It just has to be a moment where you're questioning, like, what feels better? And if it feels like shit, or if you're like, oh, I want to do it, I know it's not the right thing, but I really want to do it, go do it then. Like, there's nothing keeping you in your soul contract that's like, well, shouldn't have made that choice. Really, the only thing that's keeping you from, like, I don't even want to use the word moral, because that's the most archaic word on earth. But like, the idea of making a choice where you go, I know this is in my best interest, or this is not in my best interest. The question is, when you have that moment, are you willing to accept that you're making a karmic choice, you're making an energetic choice in that moment to either lead yourself towards what your soul contract is supposed to be, or not? And it's okay if you say no. Sometimes you just want to go and have fun and do what the fuck you want to do, even though you know it's the wrong thing and it doesn't feel great. You just need to recognize that from your soul contract perspective, karma is going to bite you in the ass a little energetically at some point in some lifetime, right? It might not be this one. So when people come to me and they're having like what they think is like, karma's terrible and I'm getting paid back for XYZ, or the biggest one I get hands down is, everybody I date, I end up with the same kind of person. And this is kind of like what you were talking about. And yes, it could be that it's reflecting back, or it could be like, you just have energetic lessons you have not learned. So this is an opportunity. It's going to keep coming up every time. So if you keep making the same choice every time, you're going to get the same result every time. So once you become aware of the fact that you're caught in one of those cycles, whether it be romantic or anything else, it's an opportunity in your soul contract to go, well, how about if I make a different choice? And then maybe you may think about it, but then you go, oh, I'm afraid of doing that. No. I know what I'm usually doing. Like, that's like a north node, south node moment, right? You're like, but I'd rather, it's easier than, And then you're like, fuck it. Let me do the thing differently this time. It's kind of like you get slingshot forward to be like, oh, thank God she's finally over it and she learned that lesson. And then all of a sudden things are different. And sometimes that can even happen just with your own mindset, because remember, as much as you are reflecting your relationship off of other people, ultimately the choice of how you're leading it is yours. We need the other people, but every single one of the choices is yours. So that's not to be like, I know I always, when I say that, people will be like, well, but I didn't choose to be homeless, or I didn't choose to be whatever. That one gets tough because you have to ask yourself, where are you now versus where were you then? And a lot of people are like understandably, they are emotionally tied to the experiences they've had, and they only see it one way. So starting to look at things from an understanding of every single possible element of your life, you chose the structure of how this was going to be, because at that point you thought to yourself, shit, my soul is ready for this. Let's bring it on. But when you start contextualizing it like that, it starts making more sense, because you recognize that there is a higher power, your higher self, that ultimately was like, this is the best choice for me right now. So our human bodies may be like, this is horrible, this sucks, why would I have ever made this choice? But from a soul growth perspective, 100% the fucking worst moments in your life were those moments where you were like, I assure you, you were strong enough to get through this. You just need to remember that. Now let's get through it. And let's also recognize that there is divine learning to take place in that.
Okay, so this part about the choices, then, there was three things I really want to touch with. Let me just start with that one. Hopefully the other one will come up. This is the choices. Oh, the Pluto and the birth. There was another thing you were talking about. Okay, so
interrupts me from now on.
So with that, like in the book that I wrote and in the workshop that's available, I'll talk about that before we end here, but there's a section that's called the embodiment of forgiveness. And this whole book was basically, I wrote it from my dreams and from me working through my own, what now I would call a twin flame. So I did a little research on twin flames, soulmates, and where did all that come? This was around the same time I was writing the book. I was really deep in what are the meanings of all these like new age words.
Yeah.
So my conclusion was, yeah, well, I'm not going to talk about that right now, but so when I was healing from my situation, which was a 7-year journey of working through my relationship material, this book was born from that. The online course was born from that. And the embodiment of forgiveness, when I was writing that, what came through was, first of all, it was like a vision of a ball of yarn that was all knotted up. And that when people say, I forgive you, or I forgive myself, or whatever, that you basically are just taking that ball and like, even though there's all these knots in there, that you're like, oh, okay, but it didn't ever actually get untied. That they're still holding all those little knots in there. And that what really needs to happen is that we go through and like untie the knots. And I know everybody here has had this happen, I'm sure of it, that you'll get a call from somebody randomly who did something 20 years ago, who's like, hey, I'm so sorry. This is them untying their knots. And it's beautiful and amazing. And we do have that capacity to untie our own knots.
Absolutely.
Or to throw them into the fire. We had this ritual at the school on the channel, where we went through this whole moon cycle where we were tying knots and like bringing them out of our body, and then offered them on our altar in the fire. So that, there's ways to work with it, but you can't just say forgive and then nothing actually happens, because then you just basically shoving it back in. And the other thing about, oh, I didn't choose this and I didn't choose that, and I have compassion when people are in a hard place and they're like, I didn't choose to be homeless, or I didn't choose for my father of my son to cheat on me and leave and never pay child support. I didn't choose that. But I also know that at some level, that every little choice that I was making brought me into that situation. It was a bunch of little choices that I kept making that I got to that situation. And then as I was untying those knots from that situation, I dialed in my psychic abilities. I pulled in my ability to raise a son without child support and to make my own money and to be able, I grew exponentially from that, all those bad choices, or like bad, from
Yeah.
all those choices that I made that got me to that situation. It was the hugest elevation in my life.
100%.
So, you know, you did get yourself in that situation. And like, and it's not to say that you didn't, it's not to say that anything's wrong. So in Tantra yoga, the thing that I always fall back into, there are no mistakes. There is nothing bad or good. There's only a polarity of sensation that we can identify as this feels bad or this feels good. And within that pole, it's like your mind that's deciding. So really, you know, while I feel compassion for people in that place, and I would never tell them, oh, you put yourself here. I would never say that. When somebody's in a
Yeah.
hard place, I would never say, oh, well, you chose this. But that when we're in those situations, it's so hard because I'm thinking of all the most horrific things that are possible,
Oh yeah.
you know, and then to just be able to be like, there is nothing that is happening on this planet in my body that is bad.
Yeah.
Nothing happening that is good. It is all a spectrum of sensation and of experience. And for some of the people, like I had a little moment of time in 2019 where I had three of my friends or acquaintances who are local here who had like massive near death experiences. One got, like, I'm not going to mention what happened to them just in case, you know, whatever, but their lives completely shifted because at that moment they faced death. They had their Pluto experience and they completely leveled up because they've tasted death, and now they're like thankful for every second of their life, and they became like instantly famous and successful, and they were doing their life purpose because they had experienced that death. And I had a moment of like, do I need to like get, you know what I mean? Do I need to have that?
Okay, so that's really interesting that you said that, because like the near death experience thing, people who have survived very serious illness or death or those kinds of things, it's like getting the like super concentrated shot of what many people experience in something like a twin flame relationship. So that death, whatever that, like, it could literally be death, or it could be your soul learning a lesson that feels like you're dying. Like, so when you're going through something like a twin flame experience, a true twin flame experience is going to have you not even getting out of your bed because you feel like your entire body is being torn apart emotionally and there's nowhere to go. Right. And so, and a lot of people have those experiences, and whatever that is. I had a woman who, and I found this all the time. Like, I found a woman who, when I was first doing mediumship, I was in a mediumship circle, and I was like, wow, am I the only person here that hasn't lost someone? And the reason that they're doing mediumship is really because they just want to talk to the other side. Like, I was just there, you know, I was like, I talk to dead people, don't you? And they were like, no, I want to talk to dead people. And I was like, gosh, shit, you know? But one woman stood out because she had lost her daughter to cancer. So it wasn't just like she had lost her daughter to cancer, and her daughter was very young. When her daughter passed away, I think she was 9 or 10 years old when she passed away. And so that was her twin flame moment. She was being brought to a place with the relationship that she had with her daughter that was going to bring her, right, basically to the absolute bottom of the well where you do not see any light and you do not think you're coming out. And I think that experience is twofold. One is because you need to meet yourself there, and that's the most important experience. But the other is for you to recognize that you're in that place, and in coming out of that place, there is something greater than you that's getting you out of there. It embodies you with a kind of grace that you recognize it wasn't just pure will that got you out of that place. And I find that a lot of people find themselves on their spiritual path after a moment like that, after a near death, whatever it is. And that could be relationship, it could be anything. Like, pick your worst moment, and then let's just put the label on that of you have died and you have come out of this, because that was one of those moments. And we call it a Pluto moment, right? Astrologically, a lot of the time we'll call it a Pluto moment, but it's something even greater than that, right? It's like, it's all that in a bag of chips.
So let me touch this Pluto thing, and then I want to answer this really good question, because that's something I also want to talk about here. So the thing about Pluto, and much earlier, you said something about giving birth and the man being stabbed in the heart, and knowing that, you know, you could die. Well, but that you trust that you won't die. But from my experience with Pluto and with giving birth, that you think you might die, and you actually surrender to that, knowing that this might kill me, and that's okay. That's the moment of such a deep surrender, is why all these other things, well, I didn't choose to be this, I didn't choose this. It's like a Pluto moment brings you to your knees. And I have had a near-death experience when I was 19, that I really thought, I mean, I fought and I struggled and I tried for like 2 hours to not die. And then there was a moment, I was out in the ocean on my boogie board, the sun started setting, and I was like, I am gonna die. And I looked at the ocean, I stopped fighting and paddling, and I just like God, please save me, help me, you know. And this is where you said there's some external power that our ego dies. We can't muscle our way out of it. We can't think our way out of it. We've expended our human abilities, and we have to. And my teacher always says that you can't teach someone how to surrender, because then it's not true surrender, because a true surrender is a conversation between you and whatever that force is that you consider as the creator. So in Pluto, and we're experiencing this heavily in 2022, with the USA Pluto turn, and also Venus and Mars coming in conjunction with Pluto, our relationship material might likely have this Pluto activation with that conjunction between Venus and Mars and Pluto. So there is a sense of surrendering. So the other thing, and there's this like an acceptance of that death. There's a feeling of like, you know, like sometimes when I have been in a very like feeling like this is it, and I'm in love with this person, and I know this is going to kill me. I know that it could kill me, and I still say yes, because it's so worth it. So like in giving birth, it's the same thing. It's like, this may kill me, yes, and it's worth it. And then you like soften into it and completely surrender. So the other thing I want to mention is about Moon and Saturn. So people will find themselves in a Moon or Saturn relationship. Moon and Saturn both have 29.5 year cycle, that they go together, and they don't go together, but it's a similar polarity between Moon and Saturn. So that is also a part of our relationship material. And what was this question? Somebody asked, let's see.
Does the twin flame moment often happen during our Saturn return? Are many people brought to that place during their Saturn return or a Pluto moment? What's your opinion on that? I have my opinion on that.
Okay, so I think when I see this and I think back to my Saturn return and I think back to my Pluto initiation, and just because it doesn't really matter, I didn't have that happen during those times. But it can feel similar because your Saturn return, whether it's your first, second, or third, it is a constricting place where you're being put into, I will say, getting put in your place, but in a good way. It's like contracting it so you only have a few things to do. It's like limiting you to a few things, which is all getting your shit together, signing all your things, checking all your contracts, contracting you. And I guess it could have some, I was getting divorced during my Saturn return. It could have some, what do you say? I have the little offshoots of it, but the Saturn return is for you to get your shit together. Whereas, there might be help in you getting your shit together through that twin flame relationship, and then or a Pluto moment. So the Pluto initiation is dying to your false sense of self, where you really, I think about the genie, Aladdin and the genie in the lamp, or however that goes, where the lamp goes into the cave and Aladdin goes in there too. And Aladdin has to find his true genius, which is the genie of the lamp. It's him in the worst case scenario, lighting up from his true, like the power in his pelvis, the power in your pelvis, that true power that we all have, which is our regenerative life force energy. So that's really a Pluto moment. And then these relationships, I'm interested to hear what Erica says, but I feel like they play a part in it.
Yeah,
but
I agree. I don't know that my twin flame moment didn't happen at my Saturn return either. But there was something that you said about, I think you hit it exactly on the head when you said you have to experience that death. Because I think that when you surrender, and I absolutely love that your experience was literally you needed to surrender to the water. You needed to be the water, right? Like, what a moment, really. But I think that the idea that once you surrender to the situation, recognizing, and I think a lot of people will fight this for a really, really long time, they will fight this idea that even if they say, oh, it's okay, I don't have control over this, really what they mean to say is, I have as much control as I can cope with right now in this moment. And so that's okay. Even if I don't have all the control, I have enough to get me through. I think when you experience the twin flame moment, you are dying to the idea that you have any control of where this relationship is bringing you. And when this moment is happening in a twin flame relationship, what's actually happening there is it's happening with another person, and it's magnified because not only do you not have any control over that situation, you also don't have control over the other person. And that person is going to bring out all of these things that then when there's, when you said the offshoot, the Saturn moment to that is when you are brought to your knees and you are annihilated, what are you doing now? Who do you look like now? What are you now? What structure will you work within now? Because Pluto was there to show you the worst, not so that you could wallow in it, but for you to recognize that there's medicine in the death, right? And so when that happens, I think in a twin flame situation, what exacerbates the problem is that it's with another human being. Sometimes I think we need to have our twin flame, going back to the idea that Debbie said, the idea of mirroring, that we're having those moments as mirrors. Sometimes we can, the popular description of it when they give pop explanations about twin flameage are, well, your twin flame is always out there somewhere. I don't agree with that. That's not been my experience. My experience is you can sure as shit have a twin flame experience, and your twin flame may not be incarnated. Like, and that's a totally different kettle of fish. But we have people that are part of our soul family that are our guides, that are our advisors. There are people that are working not in this dimension of space who are still working for us. So they may be the person who is like, well, she's out on her boogie board. Let's make sure the wind blows this way because we need to have that moment, you know? And so and also to think, this is another thing that I want to address, is like, if you're lucky, you get through life without, like, you get through life having one twin flame experience. I don't know anybody that's actually just only had one, but I think that you're going to have many of those experiences. It's the depth to which you die, and then you think it's your bottom. That's the moment where you need to be humble to the idea that at any moment you could die deeper than that. You could die further than that.
Wow.
And the question really is, what did you plan for yourself before you got here? Because you may have just been prepping that horrible moment for what another person thinks is a horrible moment, but really is the next depth to where, like, what's that saying? Like, the lower you fall, the higher you go, or like, you know what, there's some saying like that. And it's really that. When it comes to your soul contract, when you're doing some of the deep digging shit, that is very true. Now, I don't want it to sound like it's all like fire and brimstone. It's not, because we have amazing twin flame relationships and moments that it's like what I said, you need to have the contrast. So like, why is the sex so good with a twin flame relationship? Like, well, you need to know what the extreme of pleasure is to know what the extreme of pain is. You need to know what loss is if you've had something that you feel as though is the best gift that you've ever had. And so when we're walking our soul contracts, we also need to recognize, like, the amazing moments you're having are also contract moments, right? They don't all have to be like shitty, horrible, my twin flame is a horrible person. My twin flame is not a horrible person. He's a lovely person. So
So it's like extreme relationships, like extreme. Like I saw something on TV the other day, or not TV, but it was some little YouTube thing. It was like extreme knitting. So I made like twin flames sound like extreme relationship. That's what it kind of sounds like to me.
Well, they are, but ultimately the key out of that is you don't necessarily end up with your twin flame. So that's the one thing I will dispel to people, because everyone, I think it's sometimes people will get caught up thinking that, well, they're my twin flame and therefore I have to stay in this relationship. That's not the point. Like, I mean, if I'm really going to go wild on this, what the fuck is a relationship anyway? Like, we're just putting constructs on whatever the fuck you think that is for yourself. And we, in the modern world, believe that my heteronormative relationship that's been patterned to me for the last 200 years is supposed to be how I am, which is like, you know, anthropological bullshit in my mind. But anyway, the other side of that, I think, is that your twin flame, when you're in a twin flame relationship and you can recognize that you don't need your twin flame to actually be incarnated and able in order for you to live your soul moments, you get less caught up in who are they going to be and are they going to be the best lover I ever wanted and dreamed of my whole life. The point is that they are bringing you home to yourself. The point of every soul relationship is that they're bringing you home to yourself. The point of a twin flame relationship is you've chosen to maybe supercharge that a little because you want to get a little further, a little faster. And that's my opinion on that. But I think a balance, right? Like, it took a really fucking long time, 8 years, for me to find balance with my twin flame. And still, it's like, please, baby Jesus, give me strength some days, because I'm still getting those moments and I appreciate them. So when I get charged or I have a trigger about that, I'm like, oh, look what you didn't heal. Looks like you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Like,
Okay, so let's have just a minute for questions. But first, I want to just let everybody know that I do have an online course that goes with the book that I wrote. That the book is a 13 weeks guide through each of these parts and pieces of our moon, our Venus, our Mars, how we show up as Venus, how we show up as Mars, what we have programmed, our what we've been programmed to believe about our sexuality and how that shows up. And then there's a section in there working with Chiron. So the online class is like a guide. There's videos that go along with the book. And what we're going to be doing is making it live. So bringing it to life, meaning that we're going to go through the content together. Probably not the whole 13 weeks. I'm going to pick out, I'm thinking like 5 of the most powerful chapters in the workbook. And we're going to make it live. And then we're going to do like question and answer. I'm going to help you to get, because it's a workbook and there's actual work to do. We'll do it together. Erica's agreed to join and be a part of that and help. And we'll figure out in which exact ways that's going to happen. But I'm hoping while she was talking, I was like, oh, maybe she can offer, some kind of, you can book her for a reading as we're going through this material. Because what I find when I was going to Kauai every 6 months, there was a group of women that I would connect with there who held women's meetings. And those women's meetings, we all got together, told each other what it is that we're going through. We held for each other the things that we were working with. And it was so powerful. Like the most amazing things happened when the people would gather, when the women would gather and share these things. So during the Venus and Mars conjunction for the next 2 months, I'll set everything up so the dates will be clarified, and whoever signs up will probably do something like a poll to find out who can show up at what time, and the majority wins, and we'll set it so that most people can show up to the live sessions. And yeah, so I have been sincerely called to do this. Even if nobody shows up, I need to do this work right now because that book was written from like somewhere else. So the material in the book, I have gone back and done it again, like little pieces of it here and there. But I know that I need to do it. I need to do that work again. So I would love to.
That's a perfect soul contract moment though. So that's I couldn't ask for a better example of like, you did a bunch of learning, you contextualized a bunch of learning, and now you recognize that you need to go back to a moment that you had in a soul moment that you had. You need to review it for the learning from the perspective of who you are now, because you now can bring that awareness to that moment to integrate that moment. So that's a perfect example of what really does happen with your soul contract. You have these experiences. That doesn't mean that you walk out of the moment going, ding, 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 I get it all. It's a matter of now you've like learned this amazing thing that you're now going to carry with you forever. And sometimes you're going to review it, but it becomes part of the toolbox you have to navigate your soul contract going forward.
Yes, I'm so excited about Venus and Mars together right now. Like, I am so excited. All right, so I want to see if anybody has any questions. You can unmute yourself or you can type in. I love to hear some other voices. Thank you so much.
I'm looking at Spice Brooks. God bless you. I've got Moon in Scorpio conjunct Moon in Scorpio. Oh, so I'm assuming you're talking about your twin. We've got Moon in Scorpio conjunct Moon in Scorpio, Moon conjunct Pluto in Scorpio. I am a Scorpio North Node. Holy crap. Yes, ma'am, you may be in your twin flame moment. You may be in your twin flame moment for the rest of your life.
With all that Scorpio.
And I mean that with deep love, deep love. I feel for you.
Well, you know what? I feel like all that Scorpio stuff, and I'm putting it into this like little category of stuff because I feel like it is the most powerful and it's the place where it's like, fuck.
I
And
know.
it's an opportunity to recognize all this emotional energy and sexual intensity and the mystery and the secrets and say, yes, that's who I am, that's what I'm doing, and like not try to get away from it, but instead really just swim in it, you know, and like see where you can love yourself more for those experiences and those things.
Absolutely. And I keep thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know if you want to keep your partner or you don't, but I'd be doing as much sex magic as I can get right now out of this relationship.
Absolutely.
Like, do as much as you can in case you decide that you don't want to be together. You need to optimize this time.
Such a
We also
good.
have a few 12th house overlays, so we both feel that we're faced with our through each other's sex is fire, though. Yeah, definitely. There's no question. Like, there's no question. So again, what I would say to this is, are you in your twin flame moment? I mean, you have to live it for a bit to really start to get to know that. There are some traditional like journey markers that people will have. So if you were to look up twin flame relationship, you'll see certain things that I have come to find are truths. So frequently there is an age gap between you and your twin flame. Quite frequently you look very similar to your twin flame. You, like I said, you have similar pasts, so you may have had similar demarcations in your past that identify that you've had you've experienced similar like thought processes in moments of your life. And then the other is that when you meet this person, and I know this sounds super cliche, but it's not just magnetism. It is truly, you feel like you've known this person your whole life. If you're the kind of person that would never open up about shit, suddenly this person has a way of being able to bring these things out in you. The discussion is deeper than you've ever known this person. It is true, like twin flame sex is the best sex, but it's the best sex because it is connecting you to your divine nature. So it's a twin flame relationship is the ultimate divine relationship because you are looking for God in that person because you were looking for God in yourself, whatever you claim God to be for who you are, right? And so when you're in that experience, you are going to have the highest highs and the lowest lows, but you are also going to have blissful periods. So that's why traditionally, if you look at twin flame explanations, we have phases of it. I don't like the structure. Like the Saturn in me hates the structure of that because I'm always looking for where the hole is. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really apply. But I do think that ultimately what your twin flame relationship is supposed to do for you is to deeply connect you with your own power to understand that you are divine and you need to let go of your human body to understand your spirit body to do that. So there's a good chance that, you may have all of this stuff going on in your astrological charts and that overlay, but ultimately, you're having to ask yourself, like, really? And I'll be completely honest about a twin flame relationship. A twin flame relationship asks you, what is your greatest fear? Now let's live it out. And that's what it'll do to you.
I definitely have had that. You said that the age thing, my son's father was like 10 years younger than me. We look so much alike. Like there's a photo that we have, my mom took, we were like walking even with the same gait and everything. And I definitely felt like I died. Like it was so crazily hard.
Yeah.
And I didn't date anybody for 7 years after that.
Yeah.
So everything you said like fits that to a T. So whatever name that people are gonna call a thing like this, I like the term soul contracts because it's not so hyped up as twin flame is, but it seems kind of like, I will say soul contract probably moving forward,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah, or I like sacred relationship better. I feel like it's less terminal. Like sometimes I think that twin flame relationships are kind of like, you have a terminal illness that's going to be with you for the rest of your life, because even if you're not, if they've incarnated, like I often think to myself, the bravest people, and I do think, to get a little like super woo woo, I do think that you said it right at the beginning, we are transferring into a more unified consciousness as a people, right? And so I think that that's why our constructs of what relationship are on some level dissolving. But I also think that if you happen to be the kind of person who truly ends up being incarnated at the same time and place as your twin flame, I do think that you're being called to something higher. And I don't mean that like to be like, oh, well, I have a twin flame. It's not that at all. I think that you just were like, I'm okay to level up. Let me go stand in front of the firing squad and let's see, because I believe that I can bring this. And I do think it all comes down to healing, whether you're healing yourself or you're healing others. This conversation's a perfect example, right? When I talk to people truly about what the progression is of a twin flame relationship, they're like, holy shit, I didn't think anybody else had gone through this. And I remember like knuckling it on like at the worst part of my twin flame relationship, literally in the car, having to like just go buy milk, holding on to the steering wheel and being like, I surrender to you. I surrender. I surrender. I surrender. I trust you. I surrender. I trust you. I surrender. And I would literally drive like that just so that I didn't go crazy, because I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. And I am not a crazy, like I got mental health issues, but this is not one of them, So yeah, I think it brings you to that place. Deep discussions like we've never had with anyone. We've both got Mars and Gemini too. So a lot of, that's interesting. Truly otherworldly. That's a perfect word for it. Otherworldly. And you are going to discover other parts of your consciousness that you didn't even know you recognized. Like things are going to open up to you that you're like, what? And that may not necessarily happen in the relationship, but it could happen way down the line where you're like, oh, that's what that person's role was. I always think it's super interesting when your twin flame is an ex and you ended up with a child, because I always think, ooh, those kids are called to something super interesting. Like they're going to be like 46 and 2 kids that have the extra chromosome for divinity. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I'm like, only a 4-year age gap though. What the connection is. Divine counterparts. Oh, divine counterparts. I like that one, Debbie. That's a nice one. I didn't even know what a twin was. My guides kept telling me. Nice. And you said yours was, yes, yours is younger. Yeah. Interesting. Right. Funny. Relationships, strange things, relationships. I don't know how I know how I ended up being a soul contract person. I loved it when you used the word soul medium, and I was like, damn right, that is what I am. That's what I am. I was like, I'm not just talking to dead people. So and this will be a short, this is just a short comment. The comment that it was like, when you said your guides kept telling you. So in my case, I was a evidential spiritual medium. So literally people were just talking to me to talk to their dead relatives. And what I started to realize was that with clients, it switched. People were thinking that they were asking for a mediumship reading, but really what they were asking for was a like now current life reading, or my loved one had passed, but I need perspective on the relationship that I had with that person, dead or alive. And in my case, what happens is as people start to tell me their stories, spirit uses my clairvoyance to sort of put the pieces together for me to see what their contract relationship was. And then I use a couple of divinatory tools to pick out which archetypes are playing out so that you have a better idea of like, what archetype is this person really playing in my life? And that's the most, for me, totally the most interesting. Because oftentimes we recognize that what we really needed in that person wasn't necessarily a lover. Maybe we needed a teacher, maybe we needed a mother, maybe we needed a whatever. And oftentimes, a twin flame relationship will do that too. You'll end up with someone who ends up nurturing you in a place that maybe you never received as a child, and you need to heal a particular karmic issue, you know, from XYZ number of childhoods that you keep repeating or things like that. So, you know, twins will do that too. Oh, nice, you're a medium too. Awesome. Yeah. Well, then your guides are going to keep telling you.
All right. So let's see if there are no more questions. We'll go ahead and end now. This will be a nice hour and 30 minutes. What I'm going to do is put this, I'll probably make this available on YouTube so you can watch the replay. So that what the channel is a membership. We have 2 times weekly, sometimes 3 or 4 times weekly, depending on what's going on. We'll get on and teach about a topic. We've been doing that for over a year. So if you want to become a member of the channel, it's $27 a month, and you'll have access to a year's worth of sessions similar to this. Well, usually it's just one person. I think I've had a co-host only one other time, but it's amazing, and you can do that. This video though will be available to you. Mostly when we do this, we don't make these like me and Mystic will sometimes offer a free session, but they're all locked away in the channel membership. So the only way to access those is like going into the channel. And you do get a week free too, so you can like jump in there, check it out, see if you're interested. But this one, I'm going to go ahead and keep it on my YouTube channel, so you'll have access to it if you want to go back and re-listen to anything. Oh, and I definitely would like to offer you the course that I have available on this topic, and we're going to be doing work together. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me or to Erica, and we'll get you linked up with the information for that. So if there's no more questions, we can go ahead and end. Thank you so much. I was sent this link from a friend. Oh, she's a membership. Okay, cool. Nice. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, Erica. That was so fun. I want to, after everybody hangs up, I want to talk to you a little bit more, okay?
Yeah, and if anybody has any like weird questions they didn't want to ask in public, because sometimes that'll happen, then you can just DM me through Instagram, crow_and_crown. I think that's my tag. I don't know. I should do that. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Steve. Okay, bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Erica.
Bye.